everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel. And today we are continuing our Kinkfest interview series. And today we will be speaking with KikiThePuck about race and intersectionality in BDSM, femdom, and also being a non-binary femme person in the kink community. So Kiki, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, everybody. I am KikiThePuck. I have been involved in BDSM and kink in some flavor or variety for at least 15 years, publicly for about 7, and probably doing education and presenting now for about 4 or 5 years. So it's been a journey.
What got you into the kink community?
Well, it was just kind of being in a place in my life where I felt like I needed to seek out other people that were kind of doing the things that I was doing. I was in a monogamous marriage, had just had a baby, and it was a very vanilla situation. And in the course of just trying to figure out what was going on in this marriage, I realized that kink was a big part of my sex. And my ex-husband just was not interested in exploring any real facet of that in any way, shape, or form. And so that's what kind of brought me into kink publicly, in terms of like finding dungeons and finding sex positive spaces and things like that.
Yeah, so you didn't really discover necessarily that you were kinky until a little bit later on in life, which is actually, I think, pretty common, like especially for people when they get married, they have children, and they have a big life change. Suddenly they realize, oh, hey, there's this thing that's missing that I don't have, and I would really like to have it be part of my life, please.
I mean, what it really came down to is that there was always some kind of kinky flavor to sex I had done until I got with this person. And I thought, well, maybe I don't need that. I mean, we have a baby, we have a life together. It may not be the life necessarily that I want, but I love this person. So maybe that's behind me. It was more of a like, maybe I don't need that. Maybe that's just like some weird additive to these other relationships. But those other relationships, they didn't lead to the big marriage, right? So when you get married, maybe it all gets boring and vanilla and stuffy and weird. So it was almost like this idea of like, well, of course that's not something that's going to happen here, because we're married and we have a kid and we have this life. How do we go about, spanking and pegging and all of these different things when we have kind of this very Leave It to Beaver kind of life that we're trying to create? And so, I mean, when I finally kind of got up the courage to leave and do those kinds of things, when I realized that sexual compatibility is extremely important, if there's no compromise. So there was going to be no place where my monogamous ex-husband was going to stand for polyamory, wasn't going to stand for play partners, because that concept was so foreign to him. And he didn't need it in his life, and he didn't understand why he needed it in his life. I mean, I made the very difficult decision of leaving, and I don't regret it at all, but it's still one of those things where I think I was 28 when I left that marriage. So, I mean, I definitely see, you definitely see the people who come to, the sex positive centers and the dungeons and things like that, who've been in marriages that were 15, 20, 30 years, and finally they've, gotten up the courage to go and discover what it is that they want. And, coming into the kink scene at 28 is very different than coming into the kink scene, at 45 or 50. I feel fortunate that I was able to kind of get involved in the kink scene young, a bit younger, but also still with like some life experience under my belt too.
Yeah, I think for me, I've always found, I think the mid-20s, like early 20s, is a good time to get started in the kink community, although no one should feel like they need to be any particular age as long as they're 18 or older. But you do kind of have that life experience, but you also aren't necessarily living with the regret of, oh man, why did I wait this long? to have this be a part of my life? Why did I wait until I was, 50? Why did I wait until my kids were grown up when I could have been also having this thing that's really wonderful? And at the same time, not dealing with, I think, some of the issues that can go along with having your 18th birthday and then plopping down in the dungeon, the second you turn 18. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but there's certainly, risks there that maybe aren't associated with starting a little bit older.
Yeah, I think there's some pros and cons to all of it. I mean, definitely at 28, when I got into the scene, like, oh man, I really wish I would have found this like a decade sooner. And then, now sitting back on it, heading into I'll be 36 this year. I'm like, oh, you know what? I entered at a really good time for me. So it's nice to be able to kind of sit back and have some reflection on that journey and that path.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you got started in the kink community after you went through the ending of this relationship, what were some of the things that you first were drawn to? Were you immediately drawn to dominance? Was that something that you had played with previously in your relationships before you were married?
So when I decided to join the kink scene, I knew that I didn't know as much as I thought I did. So I identified as a switch fairly early on. And in some instances, I still do refer to myself as a switch because I'm definitely an adrenaline junkie in some senses. So, I mean, I 100% see the appeal of being a masochist at times. So, when I first joined the scene, I definitely want to learn a lot about submission and bottoming because I didn't feel like I was a strong enough top or dominant person. And so for me, the easiest way for me to learn is to start from the bottom and work my way up to the top. In previous relationships, I had mostly been a bottom. There was one or two relationships where I got to have kind of some time as a top, and I had played with pegging and some impact play and sensation play as a top in like my really early 20s. But really my whole experience had been like playing with people that were naturally dominant. And so I kind of took a sexually submissive role. And so really what I wanted when I first got started was to really understand what submission felt like, what service felt like, and like what is the difference between bottoming and submission. And I was extremely drawn to, there was a kind of like this collective of submissives at the Center for Sex Positive Culture in Seattle when I first got started that I just was really drawn to them. And they all had really gorgeous collars and they were so beloved by their dominance. And it was just, I couldn't tell if I was attracted to, if I wanted to be them or if I wanted to be with them. I couldn't really figure out what that appeal was. And now I know that it was, I wanted kind of my own harem of subby femmes. Like now it's like, just, again, with kind of stepping back, it was like, there was definitely that confusion of like, do I want to be this or do I want this? And I mean, I feel that has definitely crossed over into being a femme presenting human and queer in general. And when you see femmes that are of interest to you, I still struggle with, do I want to fuck them or do I want to be them? Like, I don't. I think it's kind of the queer femme phenomenon, So for the first year or so, just kind of in the public scene and going to dungeons, I really worked on like negotiating as a bottom and seeking out tops and dominates that, they enjoyed to play, but they also enjoyed to like teach. So I was able to kind of get that adrenaline high, but also these people were willing to kind of teach me and help guide me in terms of, as a top, this is what I do kind of thing.
Was it something where it was like a formal mentorship or was it more just informal, your play partners and you bottom to them, but then also they just happen to teach you as well, just part of your relationship?
I never really had a formal mentorship with anyone in the kink scene until much later on. Really, when I started playing, I used to make it part of my negotiating. is that like I'm new to bottoming. I identify as a switch, and like as we're playing, can you please explain to me what you're doing and why you're doing this? Which, I mean, doesn't make you particularly popular with a certain segment of dominance. You're just like, why do I have to tell you anything? With those who really genuinely enjoyed like the craft of what they were doing, you know, I mean, I feel like it's probably definitely a bit of an ego boost, but also it's like there are people in this community that genuinely love sharing knowledge, genuinely love having scenes with people where it's not like this super super crazy serious thing all the time, that like that giggling and laughing and talking and all of these different things are allowed to happen within the scene. I feel very fortunate that I was able to connect with people that like really wanted to share. I had a kinky Sherpa, is what I referred to her as I got started in the scene, and I feel like it was kind of a serendipitous situation. She was a older Black woman, had been in the scene in the Seattle area for about, I don't know, about 8 years or so, but had been really active in the New York scene before moving to Seattle, and was a submissive and a masochist. So having that sort of relationship and friendship and kinship with someone that looks like me and knows a little bit of that, the racial struggle of coming into a scene, especially in the Seattle area, Seattle sex positive scene is very, very, very white, and they can feel very isolating. And it's also very confusing because I want to bottom, and I am one of 3 or 4 Black people in a space with a room full of white people, and I want them to hit me. That's some deep stuff to unpack. When I went to my mother and told her, I'm like, I think this is what I want, my mom started crying. And like the only thing she could say for like 10 minutes was like roots over and over again. Like, you want white people to hit you. I don't understand. She just could not wrap her mind around it. You know, and she's just like, how could you as a strong Black woman want that? And she just, that part of it was very disturbing for her. So having someone that I could talk to who was also a person of color, who was Black, that was huge. I don't think I would still be in the scene if it wasn't for my kinky Sherpa. And because there really was no other place for me to go and like have that home base of like, am I struggling with this? How do I come out the other side of this and still be able to look myself in the eye afterwards and still stay true to who I am as a person? And like, my life is extremely informed by the skin that I'm in. There's no way for me to divorce who I've become as a person from being Black. Like, that's not possible. And so it's really hard for me when people say things like that they're colorblind. And I'm just like, that is to rob a huge portion of how I got here. You know, and it's hard. It's very, very hard. And I know it's difficult for people to wrap their head around why POC only spaces are needed.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, obviously, I'm a white person, so I can't speak to that experience. But I have noticed also in my community, I would describe it as painfully white because there's that element of alienation that goes into it where I worry, are there people of color who want to be part of our community, but we're not making space for them? And I've seen a lot at conventions in particular, there seems to be more of an emphasis on making those spaces, like having, a POC caucus, having a panel discussion, having a specific munch or a separate party or something that's more catered towards making sure that space is available. But I do agree there seems to be a lot of reluctance around having these conversations, which is why I'm happy we could talk about it now. And also just a certain level of uncomfortableness, because I think in general, people who are part of the BDSM community are probably more likely to consider themselves, air quote, woke, right? And that they get the race thing. And there is that kind of mentality of like, oh, we're colorblind. Everybody's welcome here. It doesn't matter, what your skin color is. And that can be very dismissive towards how much more difficult it can be to be part of the scene because of those factors, like you mentioned. Like, especially if you are trying to come out to your family and say that you're kinky, that is just not only dealing with your own, inner struggle with that, but then also the expectations of the people around you. That can be really, really difficult.
It is. It's unbelievably isolating. And it makes you question why. I got really involved in volunteering kind of in the kink scene almost as soon as I got started, because it was like, this is an easier way for me to meet people. And like, I discovered very quickly that like being a person of color in the kink scene kind of gives you, people either ignore your existence altogether, they or you turn into like a walking fetish. So people sort of play onto you what they think your title is. And so like was definitely like, when I first got started, like just like people coming to me and being like, I want you to be like my ball busting black goddess. And I'm like,
no.
And it's like, I want, and I want, and they want race play. I need you to call me like, your white worm and all of this. And I'm like, what? Race play is definitely not for me, even if I supposedly have the power in that structure. It doesn't appeal to me. And so coming at me that way is also not cool. Or I've never slept with a black woman before. And then usually my retort to that is, and you probably won't this time. Like, it doesn't, like, that doesn't make me feel special. Like, it's a backhanded compliment, or like, you're pretty for being black. I've never been attracted to black women before, but you're pretty. That's not arousing to me. It doesn't make me want to play with you. It does make me want to hit you, but probably not in the way that you want to be hit. It's definitely a struggle. And I do know that like the kink community does really pride itself on being extremely open-minded and being woke. But there is kind of this lack of acknowledgement that like the boards of a lot of these kink organizations and dungeons are very, very white. And the only time that you hear about them wanting to like diversify and stuff like that, it feels like people of color are used to plan the event, set up the event, and to bring their people in. But we're not given these seats at the table to help make the decisions and help guide some of those choices. And it's really unfortunate. We're pretty lucky in Seattle. There is a sex educator out here. Her name is Miss Brickhouse, and she just started an all people of color quarterly kink function. And I mean, it was the first time I went, it was unbelievable. It was the first time I'd ever been in a space where there were no white BDSM practitioners at all in the space. It was all people of color. And I've been actively involved in the scene for years, and like at least half of those people I'd never seen at anything ever. And so I'm like, if creating this space is allowing all these people who have never even had an opportunity to go to a dungeon because they've been afraid or not quite sure what was going to happen to come out, they now have this safe space to come and do the thing, but it's giving them the power to want to go and try out other spaces. And from that, I know that there is like a group of POCs from the Seattle area that are going to come down to Kinkfest for the first year because they feel safe to do that, because they met each other at these POC functions here in the Seattle area, and they're like, we'll all go together as a group and enjoy that as a group. And part of me makes me wonder if I don't think that's possible if there isn't an all POC space for them to make those friendships and make those connections and then decide to come out to Oregon. Those spaces are going to benefit this community as a whole. And I think that it's not a matter of we're talking about white folks, we're trying to keep white folks out of these spaces, or like, we hate you. It's, we can't have that conversation. A lot of times when we attempt to have these conversations, we're told that our lived life experience isn't correct. Or we're told that's not really how it is. Or kind of this idea of reverse racism, or these different things pop up that are very silencing. And so it doesn't make people of color want to attend events because they can't come and talk about these experiences. So there's got to be a place to go and do that and kind of debrief so that you can be and enjoy the other spaces.
I'm curious, based on the comment that you made about it seeming like spaces are like using POC, but how do you actually avoid having that be the case? Because I know that a lot of organizations are ran from boards and they elect members and that whole situation. And I am wondering how you might see the transition happen where there are more seats at the table for people to actually be able to participate in a decision-making capacity as opposed to just simply, help us make this party happen.
My experience with this, I had to vote with my money and with my feet. I was a long time member of the Center for Sex Positive Culture, and one of my mentors is Elena Gabosh, and she was their director for years. And there was a shakeup that happened with the organization, and I was noticing that they just were not bringing in people of color for their board, and I'm like, well, this is not working, and so we're trying to figure out how can we help, what can we do? And it was kind of met with, a lot of closed doors, or just why don't you join this committee? And I'm like, yeah, I love these committees. I'm like, but policy is where I want to be. I want to see what's going on there. And eventually just kind of, I gave up. And so I did not renew my membership. I removed myself as a fairly active volunteer. And I moved on to something that I felt more passionately about, and helping another space kind of get their footing and stuff like that. And I have a lot of respect for the Center for Sex Positive Culture, but a lot of these different organizations, and not just them, a lot of these organizations, they're not making those spaces. They're not. And sometimes you have to walk away and figure out where are you being called and where you need to be. And so I ended up being called to focusing on femdom play spaces. And that's kind of where I am at now. I mean, I show up to a couple of kink events here and there. I'm not nearly as involved as I used to be in terms of volunteering all over the place and stuff like that, because I realized that I can't be just good enough to carry the table in and bring in 5 or 6 people of color. That's a waste of the skills that I have. It's a waste of background, and so let me take that where it's needed the most. And that's how I fell into doing workshops and things like that. I fell into DIDM. I was on the board for the Gathering Northwest, which is a kinky camping education event, and I was with them for 2 years. I go where I'm needed and where they want my particular expertise at the table. And that's what I encourage marginalized folks to do, is if you're met with resistance, or all you're being used for is for what you can bring, what you can bring in terms of dollars and cents into the door without actually having a voice, walk away and find something that speaks to you. Because these organizations will either sink or swim. That's literally what it is at this point. You will sink or you will swim. And you have to decide if you're going to drown under the weight of your own whiteness and your inability to diversify and bring in those new ideas. There's this fear of losing power. And I've noticed it across so many different things, but you see it in the kink community a lot, where it's just this fear of loss of power. And to lead is to serve. And when our ego starts getting in the way, we start getting further and further away from that idea that we are serving our community.
I think it's a really good idea to, again, vote with your dollar. In this goes for so many things, but especially in this sort of situation, like this is something I feel really strongly about. If you are not a person of color, if you want to be there to support members of your community that are, don't go to places that don't allow people of color to have positions of power and have their voices heard. I do think this is like one of those things where it's not just, this is the responsibility of the people of color to do this. Like, this is something you can also do as a white person. You can say, hey, these are your policies that I don't agree with. Here are the things I think you could improve on. And maybe if you improve on these things, maybe if you change what you're doing, then I'll come back. And I think there is a degree of that I think is luxury if you have choice between multiple spaces to choose the one that has more preferable treatment or has better policies. But I just in general don't really believe in supporting spaces that don't actually practice intersectionality, because so many places have the happy rainbows, again, the we love everyone here, everybody's welcome, and then they don't actually necessarily fully put that into practice outside of having, a nice little sign that says, all are welcome here, sort of thing, right?
Exactly. We have a lot of people doing the absolute bare minimum, and then they point to that this is what they've been doing, and that we should all be excited about that, and that's not okay. And it's not surprising but disappointing every time. Anytime I hear about anything that's remotely dismissive or just downright bigoted or racist happening in the BDSM and kink community, I always say I'm not surprised, but I'm still disappointed, because it's racism is such an insidious thing, because it's ingrained. It's ingrained into, we live in a society founded on whiteness, and that we use whiteness as it is the benchmark to which everything else is held to. I have a small kiddo, and my kid's mixed, and he came up to me one day and said, being black is bad. And he's, at the time he was 5. And we started talking about why he thought that. And he's just like, well, all the characters in the books, they were black or they're dark skin. Just little things like that. We associate the color white with cleanliness and godliness and goodness and sweetness. The color black is darkness and all of this, which, we all know that black is like the official color of the kink world and universe and stuff like that. But it's really interesting how coded things are. And there's little things that people don't realize that they're doing is rooted in that. It's rooted in racism, and it's rooted in an unfair power structure. And privilege isn't about it's not about how much money you have, right? Like, privilege is about how close you are to what is seen in society as correct. Like, I have to check my privilege as a non-binary person that can easily pass as cis in this country. I have cis privilege up the wazoo, and I have to question that and check that, daily. And so I think it's one of those things where when someone says that you've done something that is racist, they're not calling you a horrible human being. They're asking you to take a look at your behavior. They're asking you to take a look at what you said and think about how that impacts people. I think the biggest thing to come out of intersectionality for me and these talks that we've been having, it feels like this has hit like a feverish pitch within like the past 5 years for sure, but impact versus intent. The easiest way to even break that down is you accidentally step on someone's toe. You didn't mean to, but you did. That person's in pain, but you didn't mean to cause them pain. Are you absolved from stepping on their toe? No, you're not absolved from stepping on your toe. It was not the intention, but the impact is still the same, even if you intended to or not. And I think that's what I ask people who are in positions of power and privilege and things like that to take a look at, is impact versus intent.
Absolutely. And this is actually something that came up during Leather Rain this year. I took a class that was sort of along these same lines, and it was by two white people, four white people, talking about racism in the kink community, and especially how to deal with these sorts of situations where you, I guess, how to phrase it exactly, unintentionally say something or do something that is racist in origin. And it can feel really hurtful to think that you've done something racist because being a racist is bad and I'm a good person. So, how in the world could I ever possibly do something racist? Because that would just completely alter my worldview of who I am. And especially being a kinky person who also might see themselves as marginalized because of that identity or that aspect of who they are, being told that, hey, actually, that wasn't super cool. The thing you just said, that was kind of racist. I think what it really comes down to, if there are other white people listening to this and you're looking to improve in this area, is to understand that those sorts of comments, that feedback, isn't about you. It's not about like trying to hurt your feelings or trying to make you feel like a bad person. It's about trying to express when somebody else feels discomfort and when you've done something that's hurtful to someone. And I hope that if we're ethical members of the kink community, especially, we would be particularly aware of how important it is to be sensitive to those things and not respond defensively and saying, I can't be racist, I'm a good person. Or I can't be racist, look at these good things I've done, for, XYZ people in my community. Like, just because you've, done outreach, just because you've done XYZ thing, doesn't mean that you're absolved of this. And this goes for myself as well. I'm sure I've done and said things that are terribly offensive. But part of it is being able to recognize that that's part of something that we need to work on. And it's not just like you are perfect and good in all things and you are incapable of making mistakes or hurting people's feelings.
I feel it's a weird place to be I'm a polyamorous human being on top of all of the fun things. And right now, all of my partners are white, and I don't use emotion. I don't educate about racism to my partners. That is outside of what I am willing to do anymore. So if you are coming to me and you're like, I want to serve you, I want to be in a relationship with you, it's like, then you need to do that work. Either needs to be done or you're doing that work on your own. I will not use any emotional labor to educate anyone that I'm dating on racial issues. That's my boundary. And so it seems harsh and hard, but it's just like in the poly community and in the kink community, again, it's very, very white. And so if I just went with like, oh, I enjoy being around this person and didn't dig a little bit deeper to figure out like where they're at in their journey of understanding their privilege and understanding understanding systematic oppression, understanding that Black Lives Matters doesn't mean that all lives don't matter. The reason why Black Lives Matters is what it is, and it's a very short, succinct thing, right, is because you can't write all lives matters, but right now Black lives are at stake because it's not catchy and it looks really shitty on a shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Black Lives Matters does not mean that no one else's lives matter. It just means that there is something fundamentally wrong in the system, that we're losing Black folks at an alarming rate to death by cop, by the criminal justice system as a whole, that redlining has destroyed the ability for a lot of Black folks to have access to personal wealth, that the gentrification of neighborhoods is causing Black folks to lose their homes
mm-hmm.
and their places. There's these different things that are happening. And so to say that everyone has a fair shot is false. And so it's like, I don't want to be in a sexual relationship, a romantic relationship with anyone that I have to do any of that education with. And my partners are really, really, really good at shutting down racist things. My partners are really good at shutting down transphobic things. They're really good at shutting that stuff down so that I don't have to use my voice for things unless I need to. And that's pretty great, you know, and I just won't have those arguments with people. Like it just I'm beyond that, because it's like it at this point, like, to say that people of color do not have a disadvantage in this country is to be willfully ignorant, and I'm not getting paid enough to teach you, you know? Just not. And the emotional labor that goes into that is unreal. And asking people to do that without paying them for their time. Google is free. It is 100% free. And you can argue with it if you want to.
Yeah, there's a great video by another YouTuber, T1J, and it's literally like how to use Google to find out if racism is real or not. And it's fantastic because it's literally like it's basically in response to all the comments he gets about like, but racism's not real. And he's like, here's how you can research to figure out if this is actually true or not. And I can't remember what that video is, but I'll put it down in the description box if people want to take a look at it, because it's really good, and I think it speaks a lot to this sort of I don't know how to say this again, but this weird expectation we have that like members of minority groups have to explain their experience to anyone who asks about it, as opposed to the person being able to use their own knowledge and resources to research it for themselves first when it's a really basic thing. And yeah, if we're expecting people to put all of their energy into having these basic conversations, like I don't know why we would think that they would want to be part of our community spaces if that's going to be the basis of their interaction. Like, come on.
Yep. It's really fascinating. It's mind-blowing, especially like in the BDSM and leather community, when someone's like, I can't believe that we have a title holder that is trans. And you're just like, what year is it? Like, what day is it? What is actually going on? Like, who moved the rock? Like, the fact that we had like a prominent leather organization pissed that we had a trans man leather title holder, and that somehow invalidated the title, is horrifying. It's horrifying. Anytime anyone brings up anything in the kink leather community or anything of that nature in regards to trans folks, I just like, your history, like, fucking learn it.
Yeah,
get with it.
I mean, there are still leather clubs that will like check your genitalia before allowing you to come in to make sure you're a real man. Like, there are some people who are really, really behind when it comes to that kind of thing. And yeah, it's mind blowing.
Really gross.
Yeah, really gross is the way to put it.
And that's just kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll get better. I have my fingers crossed, because it does seem like things are getting better, but not as quickly as I would like it to be, for sure.
100%.
Yeah. So earlier you had mentioned putting in energy to spaces that are actually, you know, kind of following along with your actual morals and ethics, and actually, you know, supporting you as a person of color. And I was just wondering if you wanted to talk more about what that space is and what exactly it is, because you did mention it had to do more with like female dominance specifically, and I would love to hear more about what that looks like.
Yeah, so we are going on, holy crap, I think it's going to be the third year in July of Diadem events, and Diadem is like the crown. It sort of started with, there wasn't a kind of Seattle-ish femdom party anymore. When the CSPC moved from their space in Inner Bay, they were doing more kind of general parties, and they weren't doing any of like they weren't doing a whole lot of this really specific parties. And so I felt that desire and need to be around, you know, femme dominant energy kind of more than anything else. And so I approached a space that is about 20 minutes northeast of Seattle. They're called the Stream House. They are a B&B. They're a kinky B&B, which is really cool. And they have they have parties. And so I reached out to them about doing a femdom party. And almost 3 years later, here we are. And it's geared towards, we were really specific in our language because we have non-binary femmes, right? We have trans women, we have gender fluid and gender variant humans that feel comfortable attributing, femdom to themselves. And so we wanted to make sure that that was very, very, very clear that, like, if you feel femme and you like to, be dominant and top, this is going to be the party for you to come to. And then it was also really important to us that we didn't put a restriction on our bottoms and submissives. A lot of femdom organizations are really, really fixated on female top, male, male bottom, and so it's a struggle if you're a female submissive, or if you're non-binary or gender fluid or whatever submissive, to find a space where you might feel comfortable, or even feel like anyone would actually want you there. So our femdom parties are very queer friendly, and identifying as the hostess and owner of a femdom organization, and I'm a non-binary person that uses they them pronouns, it's pretty comfortable. We have an evening play party, we do a seated protocol tea, and then we do a bunch of education events. And coming up in September, we'll be doing our second femdom weekend intensive, which is a 3-day, it's like 25 plus classes, camping kind of extravaganza. And I'm really excited about bringing it back. Our first year, it was a small but mighty group. There were 75 of us. And for a first year event, I think that's pretty great. Last year we decided to take a break, and Miss Sarah Blaze from Vancouver, BC was like, I would really like to do a weekender event here in Vancouver. And I'm like, sure. And so I went up for her event. And so we've made the decision that we'll switch off every other year. So it'll be in Seattle one year, and then it'll be in Vancouver the next. And that's how we're going to do that. And so it's really nice to have that support too. The Vancouver, BC femdom scene has been very supportive of Diadem, which is great. It'll be really good to see them. Our tickets went on sale last month, and a lot of people from Vancouver, BC bought tickets. So it'll be really great to see them come down. But our events they're a lot of fun. We're really big on community building, and like, it's very social, and we try to give opportunities for people who enjoy service, because there's just really not a lot of that, and learning how to properly serve tea is kind of a fun thing to learn. And we have just such a range of people who've been in the scene, from like, this is the very first party they've ever been to people who've been actively involved in the lifestyle for 20 plus years. And so there's so much knowledge and information, and people are just so giving of that knowledge and information. And I'm really glad that I decided to focus my energy kind of in this realm, because it truly is a safe space for, non-binary, gender fluid, trans folks to step into. And I don't want to be super bold and be like, I think it's a good first event, but I think it's a good first event. If you are gender fluid or non-binary or trans, I would highly recommend Diadem as a good first play party event. People are very, very social, and they want to get to know you and just share what they know and hear what you have to say. So I think that's been kind of the most amazing part of that experience, is watching something that is definitely rooted in some strong gender norms, watching us kind of evolve it into like a really cool queer experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Like, I have definitely always been wary of a lot of very strongly gendered events in that capacity, because it does tend, I think, to go a little bit towards the, female doms, cis female doms with cis male subs, and having something that is more open to diversity of gender experiences is, I think, really needed in our community. And thank you for putting those events together. I'm curious, did you have any problems with actually getting it started? Was the community pretty receptive to it, or did this kind of go against the grain of, again, that more traditional, cis female dominant, cis male sub kind of mentality?
Our first couple parties were a little slow. Like, it took a minute. But then once people realized, oh, this is going on, this is a thing, and I want to be around other femdoms, yeah. And then just kind of, like, I think in all things kink event planning type situation, there's certain times of the year that are just a little bit rougher than others, and stuff like that. And also what else is going on in the community. We kind of had like an influx of at one point of like a couple different femdom stuff started popping up, and there was kind of a lack of communication about like which weekend people were going to do things on. And what happened was a really fun phenomenon. People were so nervous about not seeing specific people at specific events that they would just flat out not go. So if there were too many events in one space, they were just like, nope, we're good. We're just going to stay home because we don't want to miss out on, we don't want to go to one event and everyone else is at the other, or vice versa. And so we've gotten a little bit better at that, because I'm just like, there's no reason for all the femdom events to fail because we're not communicating. But like this year especially has started off really well, and like the last like 6 months have been like really, really strong. And just kind of watching this community grow, and having people come up from all different parts of Washington State to come to the event. We've had some people from Portland come to check out our event. Like, it's really, really nifty that people are just like, this seems like a cool space to be. Let's go try it. I mean, I think the only weird stuff that happens at our event, I'm really sensitive to energy. And I think this party has our parties have like really good energy. And we've had a couple of like male dominants decide that they want, this is the only night they have free and they want to come to this party. And I'm like, that's, I am okay with you coming to this party, but you need to respect the space. And we've had male dominants top in our space, which is, I find to be completely disrespectful in the space. And so, and usually the only way I even find out about that is we have the way that our space that we use is set up. We have like two very distinct spaces. And all of a sudden I'll be in like one space and there's just a ton of people kind of flooding into the other space. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? And so I'll go in the space, and then you're like, there is a male top gagging some woman on his cock. This is why everyone left the space. And so I let them finish up, and then I talk to them afterwards. And I'm just like, I understand that in the sea of all the dungeons that you could go to, this one felt like the one that you wanted to come to. But this is what this party is about. And you literally have disrupted the space because of it. So we try to be really clear. And like, if I have, men that are RSVPing to this party that identify as dominants, I send them a message and just let them know that, again, you're more than welcome to attend our events in our space. We just ask that you respect the power dynamic of the space, and do not, like, if you can leave your toppy hat at home, that would be great, for this event. And they tend to be pretty receptive to those messages. One of two things happens. Either they say, oh, I'm sorry. Or two, like, I'll get blocked, or I'll get like a really fun, shitty message. Like something about being sexist. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm like, pretty much every general BDSM play party in the history of general BDSM play parties are catered to male dom, male top, female submissive. Like, that will never not be the norm in a general play party space. That is what it is, right? So it's really cool to be in a space where that's not the norm, and so that people feel comfortable. I have been in spaces as, topping. God forbid I top a woman in a space. I have had so many men interrupt my scene to show me how to do it right, or tell me what I'm doing wrong, or to offer cute little quips. And I'm just like, could you imagine a male dominant doing a scene and another male dominant walking into that scene and telling him, hey, little boy, I'll show you how to do it right. Like, the record would skip and the party would stop. Like, yeah, like it wouldn't fly. It wouldn't fly. And so that's kind of the uniqueness about these spaces, is that like we can talk about that. We have an event coming up in March where it's going to be a roundtable discussion for femdoms, and I feel like we end up having kind of a Groundhog's Day kind of conversation. And one of the things I always end with is, you know, being in a femme presenting body in, you know, in the kink world, it doesn't, for a certain segment of people, it doesn't matter what side of the slash that you're on. The only slash that matters is what is perceived to be between your legs. And everyone's like, that's bleak. In some ways, it's very true. And I'm always curious about what brings people to their kink journey. How did your journey get started? And, you know, for a lot of men, especially men that are really, really interested in femdom, a lot of their exposure to that is through porn. And that porn is definitely not created for the female gaze, it's created for the male gaze. And there's a lot of disconnect when men that think they're submissive enter the femdom community, and then you get these fun long rants about how all she wanted me to do was clean up her house and fill up her gas tank and put together IKEA furniture, but she wouldn't peg me or tell me I was a good boy. And I'm just like, well, that's cool. I would love for someone to come and clean my house and fill up my gas tank and, you know, put together IKEA furniture for me. I think there's definitely a disconnect between what it means to provide service and what you're looking to get out of your kink experience. And I think I tell people, like, when people message me and they're like, I want to play with you, and like, what's important to you? Is it the S&M or is it the DS? And if they say it's the S&M, I say, well, if you catch me at a play party and I am interested in doing like just pick up play, totally. If someone says they're interested in the DS, like, you and I can talk about what that actually would look like. I'm more drawn towards people that are into that DS, that want to provide service and be of service. But like, S&M is exhausting for me, especially if there's zero connection there. Because I have people that I am in DS dynamics with, that I'm their dominant, who I get service and I get to feed the sadist. So why would I want to just feed the sadist with you when I have people in my sphere that after I'm done kicking their ass, because that's what they want, they're going to know like how to put all the toys away and clean it. They're going to know where my car keys are to go put my toy bag in my car. They're going to know that I'm going to want a cherry Pepsi almost immediately after that scene. Like, I'd rather be with that person than the pickup person that thinks they want to be in a relationship, but that's the S&M is all that they want. And that's me personally, but it's definitely something that pops up a lot in the femdom sphere, is what's in it for everybody and what is drawing you to this. And sometimes it really does feel that like submissive men only really care about their dick and what you are or aren't going to do to it, which most cis heterosexual men, that's also what they care about. What aren't you or are you going to do to my dick? And so it's kind of a weird place to be as a female dominant, and trying to figure out how do you create these partnerships and these dynamics that are actually like feeding you as a dominant and feeding you as a person. It's interesting, and like I said, it's something that pops up again and again and again and again. And I really, really hope it, you know, if any male submissives are listening to this, that's something that you sit and think about when you're communicating with someone as a potential submissive to them, is like, your open asshole cannot be the only thing that you're bringing to the table. That can't be the only thing that you're bringing to the table. So what is it that you are bringing to the table to that dynamic? Because it's been said once, and I'm sure it's been said a million times, that just because someone is kinky does not mean that they want to fuck you.
If we had more time, I would love to go on a whole spiel about the differences between kink fantasy and reality, especially for male submissives, because there is just so much to unpack there. There's just so much that goes on, especially from you on the other end of that, being somebody who is often the object of like, I want you to do these mean things to me, mistress. I know we've only had this one conversation, but don't you just want to like step on my balls? Because like even I get messages like that, and I'm like 100% submissive. There's nowhere on the internet where you will ever see me claiming otherwise. And I like this. I don't understand it. I don't know how that level of disconnect happens between this is what I see in porn versus this is what's possible in reality. And as it turns out, the people I meet in real life are not just fetish dispensary machines, and I can't just like push a button and have them beat me up the exact way I want them to.
Right? I mean, it is the fetish dispenser type scenario, and it's so geared towards what femmes can do for male humans.
It's like air quote dominant versus actually dominant.
Right? And it's just like I'm not interested in your fuckboy manifesto, like, at all. And like at all. And that's what they send you. They send you a manifesto of everything they want you to do to them.
Yeah.
It's like a ransom note, but I don't know who the fuck they think they have. Like, they're just like, sir, I don't need this. Like, and you're not the only one getting the fuckboy manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
They just went through the list of everyone that's attending that one party. And so we all got the manifesto. There was an amazing moment at the last Femdom Weekender that we did 2 years ago. And we're wrapping up for the day, and everyone was just kind of like looking on their phone. And this gal goes, "Oh, I have a message from someone, and they want to get into tonight's party, but like tickets are already offline for that and everything else." And then this other girl goes, "Oh, is their name X, Y, and Z?" And she's like, "Yeah." She goes, "I just got the same message." I'm in a room with like 20 femdoms, and like 15 out of 20 all got the same message from the same guy. So we're like all public, like we're all in a space seeing that happen very simultaneously. And so I end up sending this guy a message just being like, "Please don't message all the women who are attending my party, asking them to break the rules for you, because now I know." And it's just this idea that that we don't talk to each other, because we do. It may not happen in such a weird way where we all happen to be in the same room and get the message all at the same time, but trust that at Munches, other doms that run different parties and things like that, I get messages saying, "Hey, this guy was a total flake at a party. This guy was very disrespectful. This person was extremely whatever." Like, we do communicate with each other when people break rules or are just flat out disrespectful, because that's all we have in terms of protecting each other and protecting our community.
Yeah, for sure. So any new male subs, or actually male subs of any experience level listening to this, please take that into consideration. I don't know why so many people seem to think the just absolute firebombing of people's Fetlife messages with "please, any female dominant in a 300-mile radius, please fuck me in the ass." Like, that is not a technique that actually gets you like worthwhile partners. And it is definitely a technique that will probably get you banned from more than a few spaces if you keep up that kind of behavior. But with that public service announcement out of the way,
Exactly.
I did want to follow up on just like 2 more questions if we have time. One of them would be, at your events, what would you say for single people who are going to the events, either like single dominants that don't have a partner yet, or single submissives who are maybe first getting started into the community? Is this something where people normally go partnered, or do you have any advice for people who are looking to go just by themselves?
So we have a lot of people who show up unpartnered. We have people who show up with, their long-term partners and everything in between. We're really fortunate that there's a human in our community that reached out, and she's like, "Hey, I really want to do a munch that happens right before your party, at like a at a secondary location. And so that's been really helpful for us too. But in terms of, people leaving the munch and then coming to our party, but it's also been really helpful for people to make some connections before coming to the party. Even before this munch was in existence, though, our party is always very social. One of the things I love about our space is that it feels like a coffee shop that really kinky things happen at. So there's all these little like conversation nooks and really nice, comfortable couches, and people are just really social. I always say that if you are a wallflower and you don't want to talk to anyone at all, that can happen at that party. But for the most part, at least 2 or 3 people will ask you how you're doing and what brought you here, because we're interested in growing the community. We're not interested in icing people out or keeping people at bay. It's more important to us to have like active, engaged people in our community than, a bunch of disappointed, I didn't get to fuck anyone, so now I'm going to take my ball and go home, people. So like, it's gotten to the point that like, as a hostess, sometimes my job is done for me by the long-term or the long-time attendees of the party, of our events. They've become kind of ambassadors for the event. I spend probably 10 hours in the week leading up to the party, sometimes 15, vetting new people. And kind of the reoccurring theme when vetting these people is I talk to X, Y, and Z people, and they mentioned this party, and they said it was a really good party to go to. And so that makes me feel really good that like people are coming to our events, they're enjoying it, and they're going out there and they're telling people. They're telling people that, they feel that this party would benefit them. And that feels great as a community organizer and as an event planner, that like, as people are leaving this party, they can't wait to come back next month, and they can't wait to tell a couple friends.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I know a lot of people get nervous about going into any new community space, be that for femdom events or general BDSM. And I think for the most part, with, exceptions for a few bad apples, like communities are generally pretty welcoming. Most people want you to have a good time and want you to come back. And it can be difficult if you're shy, if you're a wallflower, but you're all there because you're interested in BDSM. So you usually have at least one thing in common, which I think is important to keep in mind as well. And the one last thing I wanted to touch on, we didn't quite get to yet specifically, was being a non-binary femme person in the kink community. I'm sure this has a lot to do with your work for Diadem and those events as well. But is it something that came along with you kind of rediscovering the BDSM world, or was your identity something that you like had always known about or known about for a long time? I'm kind of wondering where the intersection is between your identity as a non-binary person and also with yourself as a BDSM person.
Almost 3 years ago, I decided I was going to do something for me, and I'm like, I'm going to do this thing for me. It's going to be great. And I signed up to take some burlesque classes because there's a lot of burlesque babes that are connected to the kink community, and are connected to the Seattle sex positive community. And I had the good fortune of helping produce 2 fundraisers that we actually invited some burlesque performers to perform at, and I got to meet these amazing humans. And burlesque is something that's been like a huge interest of mine for like, at that point, like 8 years. And so I'm like, I finally bit the bullet. Like, forget it. I'm going to go do it. And so I took this burlesque class, and through the journey of like learning burlesque and putting together an act to perform for like my family and friends, they have like a big recital at the end of this like 6-week course. I'm like, I think I'm non-binary. And kind of my ownership of that is my burlesque persona took on the MX honorific. And that's kind of when I realized, yeah, this is who I am. So I've been identifying as they, them for almost 3 years. I'm a lot more vocal about it in like the burlesque community and in my muggle life, oddly enough, than I have been in the BDSM and kink world about it. which has been interesting. And there are still people that use female pronouns when talking to me or talking about me. But I feel like that happens a lot more in the BDSM and kink community than it does in the other communities. But then again, a lot of that is on me because I had a very deep fear of rejection from the community surrounding my pronouns and my identity. I mean, a lot of those things I feel are, some of those things are pretty unfounded. Everyone is pretty sweet about it. I don't go by mistress, I go by mixtress, and it's, and when people are talking, I noticed that the submissives are more on it than the dominants in terms of using like my honorifics and using my pronouns, which is really cool. It just shows that they're paying attention and, and really like, trying to make a good impression. And it's really cool. So it's interesting. I don't think that it has affected really anything that I've done in the kink community. I don't think it's blocked my access from like potential playmates or anything like that, or really potential submissives. I mean, I think I'm not actively looking for like people to fuck, and I haven't been in a while. So we'll see. Like, I guess cross that bridge when I get to it in terms of looking for kinky fuck experiences. We'll see. I don't really attend like a lot of sex focused parties. So I would be curious to see how that works in a space that is geared towards less geared towards sex and less from BDSM. But for the most part, people have been pretty welcoming. I mean, it's a big part of my identity, but it's also a growing part of my identity, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes and what type of advocacy in the kink community that I will be doing surrounding being non-binary. But I feel really lucky. There's several non-binary femdoms that attend our events, so it's like I'm in good company.
Yeah, I think that is another one of the great things about the kink community, especially when you can find like, your people, like people who share your identity, people who understand that experience to some extent can be something we maybe don't always have in the vanilla world. And I am so grateful for you for having this conversation with me and sharing your thoughts and opinions and experiences. This was really, really wonderful, and I'm so glad that we got to have this chat. Was there anything else you wanted to share really quickly before we wrap up today?
Please, if you are interested in the femdom community or you're actively involved, check out Diadem events on Fetlife. We have tickets on sale for our Femdom Weekender, which is September 11th through the 13th of this year. And it's on this beautiful property out in Woodinville, Washington. We are allowing camping on site, and it's going to be pretty fantastic. And I'd be remiss if people didn't know about it that needed to know about it. And I am also producing it's called a Polyam Day Camp. It's a ethical non-monogamy day-long event, also taking place in Woodinville. The tickets just went on sale. We have Elena Gabosh as one of our guests of honor for the event, and we have, I think there's 15 classes for the day. There's a social, it's catered for brunch. It's just a really magical experience. It's $40 per person, and tickets for that just went on sale, and this event is on May 30th. And I highly encourage people to check out those things and come out and be around community, because that's our kinks are really great, but it's really cool to have people to talk about those things with in our lifestyle with. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I will put links to everything that I can down in the description box below if people are interested in checking those things out. Again, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, again, you can go ahead and check out those links in the description if anything we talked about today interested you. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye.